Thanks everybody for coming. It's good to see you. So why don't I kick things off, and then hopefully we'll have more dialogue than just us talking at you.
Are those Halloween treats in the back?
I hope so. I really hope so. Yeah. I think everyone gets a pumpkin pie on their way out, but I'm not positive about that.
Now I wish they were.
Shelton at its best.
So thanks to Jennifer for kind of pulling people together, and Senator Cantwell, thanks to you and your team for being here. I want to just maybe start by giving a little background on this RECOMPETE Act and sort of what the genesis was and why we wrote it and how I think it's going to be helpful to our region. So I grew up on the Olympic Peninsula. I grew up in Port Angeles. I was in high school right around the time the timber industry kind of took it on the chin. And unfortunately saw a bunch of my friends' parents lose their jobs and a bunch of my neighbors lose their jobs, and that kind of altered the trajectory of my adult life. It's what led me to go study stuff about how do you help communities compete, and it's what got me working in economic development for your sister organization in Pierce County, and it's probably what got me to run for office. I was just a grumpy economic development dude who kept finding myself saying, gosh, you know, what government does and doesn't do sure impacts our ability to grow jobs. But the reality is we're not unique in this region with some of the challenges that we've faced. About 30% of Americans live in communities that are described as economically distressed. And the reality is the federal government hasn't always had terrific policies to help those communities that have been distressed. And it was fitting that this effort around the RECOMPETE Act was included in a bill that was focused on American competitiveness, because it was sort of an acknowledgement that America can't compete if it leaves some of its best players off the field, right? If they're on the bench. And you know, this was really an attempt to say, let's make sure no matter what zip code you live in, you got a shot. They can make a good living. So the bill in a nutshell would set up a new program through the Economic Development Administration to provide some flexible and long-term support to communities with the goal of reducing the prime age employment gap. And it was included in the CHIPS and Science Act, and frankly, it was included in that act with the primary laurels going to the senator to my right, who led the charge on that bill. I mean, that bill would not have passed had it not been for Senator Cantwell, and certainly this provision of that bill would not have been included as a pilot if not for Senator Cantwell's championship of it. So thank you for that. I want to, maybe before we move on, I want to share a little bit about sort of next steps. We want to hear from you. I want to give just a very quick run through of what the bill does, but do we want to do just a quick round of introductions, and then I'll talk a little bit about what the bill does? Do you want to kick us off, and then I'll run through just high level what the bill does? So.
Yeah. I'm Jennifer Berry with the Economic Development Council here in Mason County.
Great.
I'm Kristen Massel. I'm the General Manager for Mason County PUD number 1 in Potlatch.
Mark Neary, I'm the Mason County Administrator. Did you have a question?
Isn't Mason 1 number 1? Isn't it?
That's what you usually say.
I put that in all the marketing materials.
It's like the first, right?
It is, yeah.
Okay, let's go for it. Number 1, the first, yeah.
And I'm Katie, I work for the Congressman. So I'm Annette Creek.
Wait, he didn't get to say his...
Mark Neary, I'm the Mason County Administrator.
Now this is where the earlier conversation gets awkward.
That's why she didn't say it. So I'm Annette Creek, the General Manager of Mason PUD 3.
Okay, well, what's wrong with acknowledging...
Which is also number 1.
What's wrong with acknowledging number 1?
Yeah.
It's all good.
Senator Campbell, State Director.
Casey Duff, Senator's Local Outreach Director.
Jay Hill, I'm the Community and Economic Development Director for the City of Shelton.
And Jeff Knighton, I'm the City Manager for the City of Shelton.
Great. Thanks. Thanks everybody for being here. Let me give just kind of a high level what the bill does. And the bill was sort of focused on 3 challenges that face communities that are trying to turn things around. One, the reality is communities that have faced economic distress, by and large, don't employ an army of grant writers to navigate congressional, federal grant and loan opportunities. And so part of this bill establishes on the front end a whole bunch of technical assistance from the EDA to work with communities to figure out, how would we close that employment gap? How, if we were able to get some support from the federal government, what's the plan? And it provides some technical assistance on the front end. Second, while a one-off grant is helpful, we would never turn it down here in Mason County. The reality is the challenges that we've run into didn't sort of come up in 1 year, and we're probably not going to pull out of it in 1 year. So that suggests you need to have a more prolonged approach. So part of the bill is focused actually not on just a one-off grant, but providing persistent support over 5 years. And then three, a one-size-fits-all solution doesn't work, because different communities have different needs. I mean, I could drive you to places within the 6th Congressional District. Later today I'm heading out to Aberdeen, right? Their biggest problem is flooding, right? Earlier in the month I was up in Forks, and they have broadband issues, and some communities have workforce issues, and some communities have derelict sites that need to get remediated and put back into productive use, and some folks have housing issues or childcare issues. And so part of the approach that's used in this bill is to say, let's provide help, but let's make sure it's flexible so that communities can use those funds to meet their greatest need, which I think is a pretty cool idea. So that's what the bill does. It was included as a pilot in the CHIPS Act, again, with great praise to Senator Cantwell for making that happen. There's $1 billion authorized in that bill. What that means is round one will probably designate about 30 communities around the country, 30 regions around the country to do those kind of planning grants. That's the technical assistance on the front end to say, hey, what's this going to look like? And then the next rounds will likely boil it down to probably around 10. We're right now in the appropriations process and trying to get as much money, it's $1 billion authorized, then we have to actually appropriate that money. So we're trying to make sure it gets off to a good start. To get cooking. So that is it in a nutshell. More than anything, I just want to make sure that we're offering, and our team, and I know the Senator's team is offering to partner with this community in any way and in every way you need, because we want this money coming to rural Washington, right? Our communities could use some help from the federal government. So that's why I'm here, and here to listen. And with that, I want to kick it over to Senator Cantwell, and, in case you've got some opening remarks too.
Okay, well, thank you, Derek, and it is great to be here, although I don't think Zinn's is open anymore, so I don't know. I guess I'll stop at Taylor's or something.
A good barbecue right up the road.
Okay. I appreciate everybody being here today, and thank you for the conversation we're about to have, because it's really important. I want to really thank Congressman Kilmer, because this really, I can't tell you how fought over this provision was in the legislation. It was very fought over. And first of all, the fact that he had this provision, the foresight to really champion in the House of Representatives, and he had good bipartisan support with Congresswoman Herrera Butler and Congressman from Mississippi. So I think that they really tried to voice the fact that natural resource-based economies had significant impacts to them over time, and how do you make the transition to newer opportunities. And the fact that Derek said, look, this has to be part of competition because we're not going to leave people behind, in a larger context to the legislation, which was kind of really focused on how do you upgrade America's competitiveness from a workforce perspective, from a research perspective, from an investment in manufacturing perspective. How do you bring the supply chain home and get more of that manufacturing here in the United States and drive down cost? So that was the whole COMPETES Act overall. And then Derek had this really important piece that was saying, let's figure out how to help communities that have been quite competitive in the past, but as economies have shifted and things have shifted, had more challenges and may really have been left without the infrastructure. I always give Snohomish County as an example. You want to talk to the EDC of Snohomish County and get some help from them? Well, guess what? They're funded by Boeing and every major aerospace partner, right? They fund the economic development. Who funds the economic development in Shelton County? right? Well, you can see who's at the table right here today. So you don't have the same resources. So RECOMPETE was about giving those communities a little bit of resource so that they could use that to understand and apply for their best solution. So we used a lot the OSO example of what happened in OSO. We obviously had a tragic mudslide, and it brought home to focus how valuable Darrington was to the whole community, but it too had challenges with market and their mill and what they were going to do for the future. But if OSO hadn't happened, I don't know that everybody would have stepped up to the plate. But in that case, WSU stepped up to the plate and said, we'll do an analysis for you. The county stepped up to the plate. The county helped with an analysis. And then the plan was to try to turn that mill into a cross-laminated timber manufacturing facility that would produce a whole wall out of CLT. And thereby deliver that into the marketplace. And we were then able to get them an EDA grant, which is really the basis of RECOMPETE here, is an EDA grant that's structured to helping communities make infrastructure investment and competition for the future. So, you know, I think I gave that example many, many times over, but we just had another example in Southwest Washington, not far, you know, from here, down in Longview, where NORPAC had been this paper mill facility literally doing newsprint, that all of a sudden that whole economy shifted to where people were reading newspapers online and people weren't as interested in newsprint from NORPAC. So NORPAC had to shift to recycled paper, but they needed help, and they needed help from us, which we helped to give them to for their focus to a new machinery in the facility, and to help them with BPA on the electricity side, that then allowed them to now be this new recycling facility and taking waste out of our landfills and literally turning it into recycled paper. So great success story. So when we think about this challenge overall, you know, we're really happy that, you know, we did this bill and all of a sudden Intel is like, oh, well, we're going to go to Ohio. Okay, or this battery technology companies are going to go to Moses Lake. So it can be a game changer, but what we're saying is, how do we help you get ready for what might be your next best opportunity? What can we do to help you actually get the answers? I mean, you have some ideas, but you may not be able to, just like WSU helped Darrington get the answers on how to do CLT production. What is it that we can do to help you get the answers so that Shelton and Mason County can continue to grow? We know you had a strong history here, you know, with the railroad going right to the forest. We know that the shellfish sector has, as I mentioned, you know, has had a great, strong support here. But what else can we do for this, you know, wonderful community to have the kind of support in getting your ideas vetted? And then, as Derek said, which was really great in his foresight in this, Derek's foresight in getting this done. And I can't tell you how much, like, this, because it was a House provision, the Senate wasn't, they were like, what? And they were like, oh, let's just drop this. And like, he had a lot of support from a lot of people. And so I just give him credit, because part of the concept is, just like you may not have, you don't have a Boeing in your backyard who's going to help you fund your studies and analysis. Once you have the study and analysis, you also need a little help and support. And that's why his targeting of the Economic Development Administration, which does fund a lot of infrastructure investment, then could come back and help you with some of those over a period of time. So that after a couple of years, so communities can apply for up to, I think it's $200,000, $250,000 for the initial research, and then for 2 or 3 years after that for the same amount of money, if, you know, the concept is a concept. So we want to give you the help and support in flushing out your ideas, and we want to be there for the planning phase and to make that work. And so it's exciting to be here and see what's on your mind today.
And just to
again,
yeah.
thank you
Oh my
for
gosh.
thank you for
Thanks.
Look, it's really great to have somebody who understands this And, you know, I mean, I can't tell you how many, like I said, conversations I had with people. I ended up resorting to Arctic char, because West Virginia, you know, they've been involved in mining, but they now are growing Arctic char. They've figured out that the water that they have in the region is really good for growing fish. And so they have these huge fish tanks all through West Virginia, and they're growing Arctic char. Well, again, you know, that's something people would never have thought that could transpire, but they're really now getting into this level of fish production. So what is the idea that Shelton and Mason County have that they would like to, you know, flush out and plan for the future, because you are the best stewards here of planning for Mason County and Shelton's future?
And I want to, again, just thank the senator, and thankfully she never blocked my phone, because I was calling a lot, begging for help in the Senate. So just to size this too, I mean, if you're doing the easy math, 10 regions, $1 billion authorized, that's about $100 million a year for 10 communities around the country, or $100 million over 5 years for about 10 regions around the country. So that can be game changing, right? That is a good chunk of dough to be able to execute on things that can help a community narrow that employment gap. So, you know, maybe Jennifer, you can kind of kick us off in terms of the discussion phase of this and give a little sense of, you know, how folks here in Mason County might think about if you were able to get resources in that regard. You know, where would you use them, and if other folks have thoughts in that regard too.
Oh, I'm definitely going to bring other folks in for that part. But it is exactly what you've been talking about. We have a lot of really great buildable land. We've got a lot of it that is zoned and ready to go. And what we have come across throughout the years is that we'll have a company come in and take a look at it, and there's always one or two really major barriers, and it is around infrastructure. They want to either be able to site someplace close to 101, and we'll drive by there so you'll get a better reference point as to where we are. But if they want a site with 101 frontage, they're capped on substation capacity. If they want a bigger plot for industrial manufacturing, we don't have a sewer line all the way out to our industrial area here in the Shelton UGA. I think Mark's going to talk a little bit about Belfair as well, and the investment that we're putting in there. So we've got a lot of really good people that are working and have been working on identifying what those projects are that we need to be able to move forward. So for us, RECOMPETE really gives us the opportunity to say, we're not stopping to look for funding as that ramps up. We're still going after funding and still looking for other avenues. But what can we then add into RECOMPETE that can help even more move that forward? So I'll kick it over to my partners to talk about the different projects that we have going on. The tour that we have will be the Shelton UGA, so you'll get
Cool.
to a really good impact on what the Shelton projects are when they talk about that. So we'll go left.
Well, and can I also say, our economic opportunities for things that we need in manufacturing, we need to have places where they can go.
Yeah.
And so it's too expensive to be in places in parts of Puget Sound. So what are we going to lose them to someplace else? So we're asking you to help make that ready, right?
It also helps us on the workforce side. About 49% of our workforce commutes outside of Mason County to work. We don't have enough jobs here to support the people that we have here. And with the residential development that we have coming in, that's only going to exacerbate that number.
Yeah.
So maybe we should kick it over to the city. Chris, where do you want to go?
Want me to go first? Okay.
Go on.
So speaking of residential development, one of the components, I think as everybody knows, is having a home close to where you work. And just as an example, Washington State Correction Center has about 700 employees. The last time I spoke with them, more than half of them don't live here. And that is something that we want to solve. But we also want to solve the workforce housing issues for other employers that want to come in and existing employers like Sierra Pacific, so that we can provide that workforce to employers that want to locate here in our region. There are a couple of items this map. The larger one is one that we put together here. There's a lot of information on there, but basically the red outline is our current city limit. The black outline is our current urban limit. So all the areas that we're looking at. We have several different single-family subdivisions. Hopefully one of those, the largest one, which we'll drive by a little bit later, will have a multifamily, large multifamily component. It's going to be about 1,200 units over 10 years. Awesome. Is what the plan is today. But a couple of things that we're looking at are infrastructure needs surrounding our employment needs. We have about 840 acres roughly of industrially zoned land that we need to provide services to. Water infrastructure, sewer infrastructure, transportation in particular, to make sure that those sites are viable for future development. And I'll point these out now, but again, we'll drive by them and I'll point them out as we're going by. The area around the port up on 101 has our satellite wastewater treatment plant. And one of the things that we're focused on is expanding capacity of that treatment plant because our current treatment plant is discharges to Oakland Bay. And Senator, you mentioned the shellfish growers, a huge partner in our community. We want to be able to help our shellfish growers, our partners there, by increasing stream flows into the headwaters of Goldsboro Creek and others that will support the salmon industry and the shellfish growing industry, and protect Oakland Bay on the environmental side, and Hammersley on the a few other items, water infrastructure, we have that basically to both of the large industrial areas, but we don't have sewer. And that's one of the things that we want to focus on is providing those sewer lines. The city's investing in a larger piece of property for a regional pump station to take everything in the city up to the satellite plant, which will again enhance those stream flows and replenish the aquifer. So those are the types of things that we're looking for as far as industry. The EDC has been a great partner in trying to attract those folks. I've met with several of them, but we do oftentimes run up against that large impediment that basically stops it. We want to be able to provide jobs for folks that live here so they're not commuting to Olympia or up north. But that will also save the state and the federal government money in the long run, because we don't have to fix the interchange down at 101 and 8. So all those types of things is what we're trying to accomplish.
Great. Excellent.
What have been the companies that have been interested in industrial land, but you know, what kind of businesses?
We've had anywhere from food production to even aerospace manufacturing. We are a pretty good site for outside of the big assembling of the giant planes, but parts of it, tech companies, you name it, we've had them look here.
And you've got the sites, but they need the infrastructure to support it.
Correct.
Yeah.
We've got two really big sites. The port out on Johns Prairie has about 150 acres, and there's not a lot of large 150 acre industrially zoned, already ready property. The port is open to a buy or a lease option there, so it does make it really attractive to companies. We've got about 400 acres over at Sanderson Field that, while sewer is the biggest issue at Johns Prairie, when the PUD3 built their substation over there, they set it up to be able to add capacity quickly. So, well, quickly-ish, because of transformer, So that one makes sewer the only issue at Johns Prairie, whereas Sanderson Field, you're looking at sewer, electrical, a consolidation of the water systems that are over there as well. But there is a lot of interest on that because it is on 101. You can have the visual that a lot of those businesses really want.
And size. That's what we're hearing around the state, is that most people don't have the size of industrial land available, the acreage. So if you have that, and we can help solve the infrastructure problem, then that's really, you know, would differentiate Shelton. And
correct.
And Additional infrastructure would help with getting a lot of these large subdivisions and annexations online within the city of Shelton. We have around 2,500 units of potential development, which could, depending on household size, nearly double the size of the town within the next decade or so. If we had the infrastructure to serve the development, we're having to have some negotiations with developers right now over getting that infrastructure in place, because they are ready, they own the property, they're ready to subdivide, they're ready to build, and we're having difficulty providing services for the 400 unit development, 250 unit developments. It's too much for our small system to handle right now, based on historic practices. And because we have the opportunity to provide such affordable housing, it's much less expensive in Shelton and even in the area. I personally just moved down here from Seattle a couple of months ago because I could afford a house down here versus the condo I was living in Seattle. And so I think a lot of people, that could be a really attractive opportunity for people to come and own their home in Shelton with municipal services and with large employers nearby. The trick is going to be us being able to build out the infrastructure such that we can support the continued growth of that affordable housing. And that'll be a huge attractor, I think, for employers within the region. When I was working in King County, we had employers who were coming to us with struggles about retaining their employees because there was nowhere for them to live, and they were smaller, 100 to 200 person companies who were moving along because they had nowhere to go. And so I think we have a great opportunity to capture that regionally, so they don't leave the state, as you mentioned earlier. They stay local, and we have the space, and we can build the homes. We just need the infrastructure to see that through.
Well, that's the dream, right? Is being able to live and work in the same place. A lot of the communities I represent, there's a real concern because we used to export wood products all over the place, and now we export young people. And that doesn't really work, right? And so the question is, I was just up in Port Hadlock. I visited a site where they're hoping to build sewer. We met with Habitat for Humanity up there. They said, on this site, Habitat without sewer can build 3 units of housing. With sewer, we can build between 160 and 200 units of housing, right? So the stuff around infrastructure really does get around even tying into housing affordability and workforce issues and all that you're talking about.
Well, and to carry on with that, part of the infrastructure as well is if we were to accomplish the things that are in our longer range plan, removing our satellite, increasing the size of the satellite treatment plant and closing down the Upland Bay discharge, that opens up the shell fishery, that increases salmon habitat.
Yeah.
We can see economic development and growth while also bettering and improving the environment, which is, I think, a story that we could share nationally and really show people that you can be green, but also see the other kind of green as well. Yeah. So I firmly believe in it, and that's why I came to Shelton. I was really excited about the opportunities that we have here for that.
Great story. That's awesome. Should we hear from the county?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the tricky part is how do we coordinate with everybody, right? So if we just focused on Mason County and the areas that we're in within Mason County, we'd really not be addressing the bigger issue. The bigger issue is how do we coordinate with all of our partners? What can you throw under infrastructure, right? Schools, fire departments, our partnerships with the city and the public utility districts, super important to get those communications together and really plan out development. I think that we've done a good job up north in the Belfair area, probably out of a necessity more than a plan that had been put in place. So a sewer utility got built that had the capacity for quite a bit of growth that didn't occur. And so then we were kind of forced to say, how do we attract more people here? Well, we have to extend our sewer into these other areas. Well, if they're going to have sewer, they're going to have water too. So there's a private water purveyor there that we have to coordinate with. We've done a lot of that great work already, I think. We've even coordinated a lot with the Department of Transportation. So Highway 3, as you travel up north, sometimes can be a little bit busy. So working with the Department of Transportation and our legislature here in Washington State, we were able to nail down a freight corridor that's going to really have some drastic improvements.
Yeah.
So I guess when I look at it from that perspective of what are we trying to accomplish here, it's a pretty broad perspective, right? in terms of, yeah, we can get the industry here. We can get the people here. But then we've really got to think broader about how does that impact our entire community.
Yeah.
And that's the part that is traditionally tough, and I would imagine it's a common issue to have in rural counties like us. So forever we're focused on residential development, 5-acre parcel of land, a home being put on it. We enjoy the benefits of some amazing waterways that tended to be vacation homes for individuals, so they weren't utilized year-round. We've seen a change. Now that's being utilized year-round. How does that impact all of the other things that happen, right? The traffic side, the environmental impact side, these sewer systems that were put in place and handling something 3 months out of the year, now maybe occupied 12 months out of the year.
Yeah.
So there's a larger picture that I'd like to look at. I think the cool thing about Mason County is that I feel like we have a great relationship with EDC and all of our partners that are sitting around this table especially. But I just feel that there's other partners that need to be included in it also. So
yeah.
Those rural services that aren't used to exponential growth.
Yeah.
I don't want to determine success, right? So success is we get this development to come. If we don't have a plan for how we're going to make sure that we can accommodate all of the ancillary services
yeah.
that are demanded by that increase in population, then really are we successful? Big issues, right?
Yeah.
I was super excited to hear you guys talk a little bit about the technical assistance side of it also. So again, we're small governmental entities. We don't have the grant writers, like you said.
Yeah.
We don't have the staff that we do have are amazing, but when you look at the scope of responsibilities associated with staff that we have in our departments, and you compare that to a larger governmental organization, night and day difference. Our folks they're focused on daily operations all the time. And their foresight might be a year out in advance, and that's considered long-term planning. So how do we change some of that stuff? How do we provide those resources to accommodate the requirements that come with federal money to us, right? There's a lot of reporting requirements. There's a lot of coordination that needs to happen and be documented. How do we get those resources to come with that? And then the other challenge I think that we're seeing is that you see this deluge of federal money coming down into state government. It's going to trickle down into the local side. So Mason County and the city of Shelton and the PDs, they may get funds to do some of these projects, but I think where they're limited is in their internal resources in order to plan, design, and manage the projects that are there. The other complication we're going to have is that, so immediately I think, well, we just contract out for it. Well, the individuals that we're trying to contract out with, they're competing for these projects that are in Pierce County, in Thurston County, or up in King County. So our project size doesn't attract these individual private entities to come and work with us. So the timeline associated with the money, how can you guys help us attract some of these resources to our area, whether it's internal engineering staff to come in, our geodata folks that we need, for GIS. So that's where I'm really looking to Congress to say, here's some ideas, or
yeah.
here's some potential things that we can do to help accommodate you in being effective with the programs that we're going to put out.
We're going to help you fund what you just said you needed. We're going to say to jurisdictions, you have an idea that you want to pursue, but you're so small that you don't have that infrastructure investment to do that. We're going to help you with those ideas and getting the information. Just like I said, WSU stepped up because they felt bad about what happened at OSO. Otherwise, Darrington Mill would have not had that information, right? So the mudslide caused WSU and everybody to help them. So But we know that so we want to help smaller communities because we need you with your affordable land.
Yeah.
And, you know, we need you to compete too. We can't, you know, can't compete by just putting things all in expensive places. We need to drive those opportunities into other parts where they're ready, if not for a few things. And plus, we want, you know, this economy that's going to continue to play out. One thing I'm being reminded of is how much, I'm pretty sure it was Mason 1, maybe it was Mason 3, but we had some hearings on broadband access, and you guys came and testified about unique models. I mean, that's another thing to explore here, is just how do we get this concept of where utilities are providing the last mile. We need fiber everywhere. It's so important. It's important for the smart grid. It's important for security. You know, our systems are getting hacked, and we need to have fiber so that you can have a secure communication layer. And believe it or not, the smart grid can actually detect fire. Like, it can detect fire from the noise and then basically shut down the grid, as opposed to you guys. So all these reasons, so Mason, you know, PUD has been innovative here, and I think, you know, having broadband capacity, I know that we're talking about basic other infrastructure, but I do think that that will help, you know, in making the county attractive as well. So we definitely will help you with those resources. You tell us, basically the first grant is to help you with some ideas that you have, but you don't have the resources even. Like I said, Snohomish County has an EDC that's got, you know, probably Blue Cross, Boeing, you know, all these people, they have a lot of money. All those people chip in. That's how they do economic development. But if you're in a county that doesn't have that, you don't have those partners. So we're helping because we're interested in what you have to offer, you know, as a community.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear about the technical assistance part of that grant. I think that that's essential for, if your target is small rural communities, absolutely the first thing that's needed.
We're seeing that in some other agencies too with the infrastructure law. We just did a roundtable with USDA Rural Development. I had a roundtable with HUD. They're offering some like pretty small, just technical assistance grants. DOT also, in the infrastructure law that was passed, there's some rural carve-outs, and part of the discussion has been around simplifying that application process for the rural communities when they apply for infrastructure funds. So I think the federal government's sort of waking up to this problem statement, which is you don't have an army of grant writers, which is really important, right? I mean, because too often, I mean, my observation of this, and this is part of the reason I worked on this, was too often you see federal policy just amplify the inequality that we already see, where the haves get more and the have-nots get further left behind. And like, I think a lot of the areas I represent are sort of tired of that dynamic. So we're trying to change that. Yeah. Should we hear from the first PUD?
So I'll kind of echo and add on to some things we just talked about. In addition to assisting with, you know, the technical assistance, the grant writing, the preliminary engineering, just to get the concept and the budget developed for a project to put forward, is resource drawing for small agencies. The other thing that we're experiencing with the appropriation that you graciously got for us for our Delta project is the cost to comply with all the things that get wrapped into these fund packages is just outrageous. Having to redo NEVAs that were already done by a state agency, the Buy America, Build America, what if you can't get American steel, what do you do? So, and then the timeline of it. So there's just a lot. I mean, we're very grateful and excited about the funding that's coming down, but trying to navigate through all of that. My team is 26 individuals. There's 4 of us on the management team. We are project managers, we are lobbyists, we are grant writers, we do, you know, we hire out, we contract with grant writing firms and engineering firms to augment our tiny staff, but it's still overwhelming just to be able to spend the money, just to be able to sign the contract. So I would just leave that with you guys, and Katie's great. Katie and I have been talking quite a bit about the challenges that we've had on some of the grants. Again, super grateful for it, looking forward to making that project happen, but it's been tough.
Yeah.
And then a lot of what Mark described about partnerships and rural infrastructure applies to me because my agency serves power just in a really specific defined area along the Hood Canal up into Jefferson County, actually, that we do water throughout the entire county. And so, you know, things that we focus on are did once policies. So anytime we have a ditch open, we contact whether it's Mason PD3 if it's a water system, local internet service providers, other private water districts. If it's in our power area and we don't do the water there, the ditch is open, who wants in? And let's get in all at once. So that in itself is helping to do that rural broadband deployment that you've talked about. Just getting conduit in the ground so they can come back later and pull the cable in these little communities has been huge. And the Mason County Commissioners have been very generous with the American Rescue Plan Act funding that they got. They subawarded that to us and Mason PD3 and a private internet service provider here in Mason County. We were able to connect these little pockets on the Hood Canal who otherwise would never get served because the cost per home pass is just too great for a private company to take on that kind of debt.
Yeah.
And then, so for us, when we're talking about workforce challenges and economic development challenges, you know, talking about developers and manufacturing facilities coming in and saying, where are people going to live? Well, I serve the rural communities for the people that don't want to live in the UGA, that don't want to live in the incorporated cities or in welfare. They live in these rural pockets, up and down the canal, out on the west end of the county. And so water availability and water infrastructure in these rural areas is a huge barrier to residential development. And so what my utility is doing, because we own about 76 water systems now throughout Mason County, is we are heavy applying for grants on the state and federal level to not only replace the aging infrastructure, but also responsibly plan for the growth in the areas that can accommodate it. So like Union is a huge area for that. We have $9 million worth of water projects that need to happen just in that zip code alone. And that's a rural community that's poised for clustered residential development growth. And so when you have
is that water at
yes,
Union?
Yeah, just water. We do power there too, but and we're actually building a substation there. But and I can go off about substations here shortly. But the water needs are real and they're expensive. They're outrageously expensive. So that, you know, not just looking at UGA is important, but looking at the other areas of the county that feed into these hubs, that's where a lot of people choose to live. And so that infrastructure has to be there in order for them to get that building permit or final occupancy permit. So we need to look at holistically on what the infrastructure needs are. In addition to that, Mason Community 1 is also in the process of planning and or building 2 substations because we have had growth and we have aging infrastructure that needs to get replaced, and we just simply don't have the population to spread those costs amongst responsibly and keep the rates affordable because we live in a low-income community. And if you're talking about Justice 40 initiative considerations in federal funding, you know, we have 2 federally recognized Indian reservations in each of our service territories, and we have a low-income community. So having assistance to look ahead and say, we know we're going to need these substations, we know these water system improvements have to be done in order to accommodate the residential growth outside of the UGA, those are things we also have to look at, in addition to these really great projects that I'm proud to chair the committee on the EDC that's working on layering these projects, but there's that outside aspect we have to consider too.
Awesome.
Well,
you want to bring us in for a landing?
I know, yeah, that was a mouthful. Yeah, so we just, you know, support all the infrastructure projects. We really look to see where the growth is going to happen, where the properties are. We don't build ahead because we don't want stranded assets because, you know, we don't want to hit ratepayers with more spending than is necessary. Because we are 85 years old or so, and you have assets that need to be maintained. So it's very costly, so we do maintenance along the way. So I think it would be great to be able to do ahead of time. I think that's the downfall we have, is that we need to have these things in place ahead of time and ready to go for companies as well as the residential communities for all the area. And then, of course, we have the fiber optic system, and it's open access, and it's, you know, fastest in the world with thanks to doing it. And so it is a great thing for companies, and they do ask for that, and they need to have those type of technologies available and be able to as well for the electric system, for SCADA, and just as you mentioned, Senator, for fire control and all those other things.
Did you say SCADA?
SCADA, oh yeah, yeah, it's great, so, I'm glad I could do that, but thank you for being here.
Thank you. Okay, should we go on a tour?
Yeah, let's do it. Do you guys have any questions for us before we hit it, or? Okay,
I think so, I just appreciate you coming.
glad to
Well,
be back.
Derek, I'm not kidding, Derek, the brainchild of this, and I'm sure you thought of every corner of the district when you did it, but.
Yeah, we did.
But
We
this is
talked to the
where-
Department of
This is where we're
Commerce.
talking to
We want all of the
people.
grants
Notice
in the.
that, though, so he
Yeah.
thinks, that obviously, he must think that.
Yeah.
We want all the grants here.
Apparently Derek wanted to come here to talk about it, so that says something to me.
We're hoping
Says
4 of the
something.
10 pilots will be in the 6th Congressional District of Washington. I think that seems fine, right? You know?
It seems fair.
So.
No, I just really appreciate you guys getting ready, because like I said, there is more economic opportunity, and plus you're also a conduit to what could happen with the peninsula. You know, it's not likely people are just going to leapfrog out, you know, further out, right? So it's, I mean, I'm not saying that there aren't things out there. We're working on, obviously, grade separation and all sorts of dredging and, you know, things, but in the essence of things, you help the whole peninsula by solving some of these problems too.
And the whole state, right? I mean, we can solve each other's problems. Seattle's got a growth problem. We got a jobs problem, right? Like, we can release the pressure valve on them and create some opportunity here, right? That's a winner.
Well, and to that point, the Secretary of Commerce, when we first started this process, it was 2 summers ago, yeah, she came to Seattle and had a conversation with a lot of the high-tech community. And before she even went in the room, they pulled her aside and said, "Where are you guys going to go? Because we will follow." And I was like, what? And they were serious. They were like, it's so expensive to do business now, you know, in these areas. There's a lot of technology and things to unfold, particularly, you know, in manufacturing. But if we don't find cheaper places for them to unfold, we're going to lose the opportunity to somebody else. And so, and they meant in the whole country. They meant in the whole country. That's a challenge for the whole country, right? So that's why so much of the bill is about how do you help these more rural communities, or, you know, on the cusp of, you know, say Puget Sound. How do we help them so that they can, you know, help still capture that economic opportunity? So anyway, it was an interesting footnote. Okay, let's go.
So I'll